One term that McLuhan used for some of the most primitive forms of human communication, or I wouldn't say primitive, but let's say historically early. So they happened a little bit earlier than the digital age we live in. McLuhan called that first period of human cultural development the age of print. Obviously, because print was the only mass medium available to people at the time. So the age of print lasted from the 18th century till mid-1900s, and McLuhan called it the Gutenberg Galaxy. The reason why is because Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press in Germany. So basically, the idea here is very simple. The Gutenberg Galaxy, according to McLuhan, was the historical period when the whole, remember his idea that the medium is the message? So the whole human culture was based on the medium of print, the medium of a book or a newspaper. And that was pretty much the only way available to people to communicate messages to large groups. So mass communication, that's why we call it mass communication, right? And that's why we call it mass media. The very early, the mostly available to people, historically I mean, medium was print, and hence the name Gutenberg Galaxy, because Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press. So let's move on to the next slide. Electronic age. Of course, that's what followed, right? After the 20th century brought about so many technological discoveries. We talk about the electronic age. After the mid-20th century, more and more ordinary people were able to afford technology. So people started having phones or gramophones. People started using telegraphs to transmit messages. And then later on, more and more people started buying TV sets, or even later, computers. And then more and more households in the United States and worldwide started getting connected to internet. We slowly entered the electronic global village. So we already spoke about the term global village and what it means. It means interconnectivity between people in the world due to developed technology. So electronic global village basically describes the era of human cultural development when telephones, radio, television, computers, internet, social media, well, obviously McLuhan didn't know exactly that we'll have social media, but the idea was there, that all that technology will lead to a new sense of the community, the global village. And isn't it true? Think about this. If there is a protest, let's say right now in the news, you probably have seen that there are protests in Belarus. 30 or 40 years ago, you would only maybe hear about it a week or several days after if one TV channel here decides to cover the story. But now we know exactly what's happening right now in the world because we have social media, which exactly translates to this idea of the global village. We're all interconnected. There is no delay in message transmission anymore. We know exactly what's happening to people in most of the countries in the world. We know their pain, we know what they're going through, we know what's happening there in other communities. Same thing here. If something is happening in America, people in other countries will know immediately through Twitter, right? So through social media. So that's the idea of the global village, that it's so interconnected that it almost feels like problems of the world are pretty much common to some extent. All people share them, or at least they're aware of them. And again, there's a lot of there can be a lot of criticism here. We can say that not all countries receive equal portions of media coverage, and of course that's a problem. But the idea of the global village is still here, that digital technology makes it more accessible to us to understand how the societies in completely different parts of the world live and what they're going through. Moving on to the next one. That's a quote from McLuhan. He said that the medium shapes and controls the scale and form of human association and action, and is therefore the message. And again, if we think about it, that's exactly true. Depending on what medium we choose, especially now in 2020, that's an extremely relevant quote. Because sometimes, no matter what message we're trying to communicate to the world, the way it looks will largely depend on the channel of communication that we select. So if, let's say, you have the same idea. Let's say your idea is that we should not destroy the environment and we want to reuse plastic. And that's the idea you want to transmit to the world. Depending on what channels of communication you will use, your message will change dramatically, right? If you use a TikTok, You will probably create a funny short video that explains how people destroy the earth by throwing away plastic bottles. And it will be catchy. Maybe you'll put some catchy tune on the background so that people remember your message, they watch it, and they really get it. If you use Instagram, you will probably use a picture that shows how disastrous the consequences of the lack of environmental plans are. So you will try to show people what happens if we don't take measures. Or if you use Twitter, again, a dramatically different approach. Here you would be trying to put your message in as little words as possible, to be as short and concise as you can, to be efficient on Twitter, because your medium is your message now. It shapes the way you communicate your idea to the world. So in some sense, McLuhan's ideas are extremely relevant for people of the 21st century, and it's pretty revolutionary on his side because when all those ideas were created, there were no social media.